to better. My name is Tim Mackey, and I'm Principal Security Strategist over here at the Synopsys Cybersecurity Research Center. I do want to be kind of upfront with everyone. The focus of this session is to expose some of the complexities of modern.
I am Cihan Vehbi Salioğlu. I would love to be there with you.
Then there's a web UI, which is going to be likely a responsive one written in HTML5. Lots of API-driven data sources that have things where malicious code is being added into components. For buffer was last updated fixes in a timely fashion, but they're not making any promises. Releases will be fully automated, and any merge into master will be published. We're going to have to remove inactive collaborators, publish rights. That you could have an automatic publish capability made scarier still by the fact that there are 52,000
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the New Statesman Cyber Security in Financial Services Conference. This is day 2. A very warm welcome in person and a very warm welcome wherever you're watching this, logging in online. It's great to have you all with us for the second day. This is our 4th iteration of the conference, our first hybrid event, our first post-pandemic, and it's really fantastic to be among you all. And after a day of insights yesterday, what can we expect today? Lots and lots of topics to discuss. Among the things we're going to explore, human-machine interaction, humans at the heart of security. We're going to talk about the dark web. We're going to talk about threat detection and threat intelligence. We're going to talk ransomware. We're going to talk digital identity and much, much more. My name is John Bernstein. I'm a former deputy editor of The New Statesman. As of yesterday, as we did yesterday, we're going to invite you all to get involved, and please do, using Slido. The information is just there behind me, slido.com. So go to slido.com, download the app, or just go to the web address. It is hashtag NSCyber2021. So NSCyber 2021. It doesn't mind about upper or lowercase. It's all together. Get involved. I've got a question coming up later. We're running a panel, actually with our first speaker. He's sticking around to be on our panel right at the end. And I've got another one of our poll questions to ask you. So we'll be using it for poll questions, but we'll also be using it for you guys to ask questions of all our speakers today. The other thing I should say is another quick word for our sponsors. You can see them on the screen behind me, on the screens behind me. Just want to say thank you once again. As I said yesterday, we couldn't put these events on without their support, so we're very grateful. Okay, that will do it for me for now. What I want to do is welcome our first speaker of the day, our keynote speaker. And in a sense, we're picking up the theme that we ended with yesterday. We are talking about security culture. We're going to do so in the company of John Scott, Head of Security Education at the Bank of England. Please welcome John to the stage.
Morning, everyone. So, September 2020, I did something that I had not done for a very long time. I left the house. This was an unusual leaving the house, though, because there was a lot of change in my family at the time. My son had just started at big school for him. He'd just gone into primary school. My daughter was still at nursery, and me and my wife, therefore, had to take 2 generally not too cooperative children in 2 different directions under some time pressures. And we weren't used to it, because we'd been in lockdown for the best part of 6 months at this time. So anyway, it's about 8 o'clock, and we're desperately trying to put Wellington boots on the right feet, or not, but at least the right set of feet. And we're trying to get them out the door. And my wife issues those immortal words. Where are my keys? They're not in her bag. They're not in the key drawer, which is where they're supposed to be. They're not in the backup key drawer, which is a bowl on top of where the key drawer is. They were not anywhere. And we're getting stressed because we now have a time pressure. You can probably guess where the keys were. They were in the outside of the door and had been all night. Now, I am a seasoned security awareness professional, so I knew exactly what to do. First step, I confiscated her keys. She had lost key privilege. Secondly, I sat her down and I put her through the short version, only 45 slides, of the key policy for our house. I'm not a monster. She didn't have to do the full 90-slide version. And then I made her ask 5 questions. She only had to get 4 of them right before she got keys again. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we were late and I slept on the sofa for a month. So, who is this poor individual that you see before you? My name is John Scott. I work for the Bank of England. I've run their cybersecurity awareness programme and then more widely their security awareness programme for the last 7 years. I'm also a SANS instructor. I teach Management 433, which is called Managing Human Risk, which is also about security behaviours and culture. I am not Bart Simpson, but much like Bart Simpson, all of these are my own opinions. do not represent the official opinion of the Bank of England, Sands Institute. I am not a regulator, and any other disclaimers you'd like me to put on, it's all on me if I say something stupid, okay? So, let me tell you how that story ends. Obviously, I didn't do any of that, and there's 3 reasons why. Number 1, my wife knew not to leave the keys in the door. It was an accident. Had I started lecturing her about something that she already knew, she would have got annoyed. Number 2, it would have interrupted the key business of the house at that moment, which was getting the kids to school. That was our task. And number 3, and I think this is the really big one, she had not treated me in any way unkindly when I did exactly the same thing the week before. Because the thing about having 2 small children and a cat who wants feeding as soon as you come in through the door is that moment of distraction leads to error. It's not deliberate, it's not malicious, it's just an accident. So, what do I want to talk to you about today? I've got 3 topics that are in your brochure today. I want to talk a little bit about people, process, technology. I want to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of people. And really, and this is the most important thing, I want to talk about how security can be champions for change. Not just the Department of No, but actually truly working with our businesses to make sure that the thing that they need to do is being done as safely and securely as possible. What I'm not going to talk about is this. Now, I went and I speak on security culture quite a lot. I went to a conference in the before times, about 3 years ago, where quite a large technology conference, a lot of security professionals, a lot of IT professionals, and they said, we've done some questions beforehand, we've done some polling, we've got some great results for you, and we've got a couple of questions on security culture that you and the panel that you're on can discuss. And I said, great, can I see the questions? And they gave me this one. If we define a healthy cybersecurity culture as clear policies about acceptable online behavior. And I'm not going to read the rest of the slide because that's where I said, let me just stop you there. This is somewhat of a flawed question. I hope you would agree. Because security culture is not about policies. I would argue that security culture isn't a thing. If you talk about security culture, I do it as shorthand, I'm going to do it through this presentation. But anytime I say security culture, what I mean is a culture that values security, along with all the other things that it does. Because culture isn't something we create, it's an emergent property. It just happens. What we can do is try and steer it. But there is a whole heap of things that go into it, depending on which model of culture change you like. There's a whole heap of things that go into it. All I'm going to be talking about today is how humans interact with it. Because ultimately, we can try and change the culture to where we want it to go, but we're always bound by outside forces. We're always bound by what's happening in people's real lives. We're always bound by their reaction to the news. All of these things will change our culture. And even our own cultures over time change. You would imagine that the Bank of England is a very conservative culture, and it is. Compare it to the Bank of England 15, 20 years ago, we're screaming liberals. Our own culture changes to match the culture of the society that we live in. So when we talk about culture, the best definition I've heard, and I think this came from Gartner, is the way we do things here. I think that's beautifully simple. And yet, when you start poking at it, it's actually got a lot of depth to it. So anytime I say security culture, number 1, I mean a culture that values security, and number 2, I mean the way that we do things here. How do we encourage our colleagues to behave in a way that makes the best security decision at any point in time? So I think number 1 is we have to accept human error. I love this photo. I went looking for a photo of the Suez Canal being blocked, and I found this brilliant photo, and I realized it was Creative Commons, which is fantastic, so I can use it in my presentations. And then somebody pointed out to me, you know, that's not a photo, that's Microsoft Flight Simulator. And I said, let's make sure I cite that correctly then. So within a few hours or a few days of The Suez Canal starting to get blocked. You could do a virtual flyby around it, which is one of the things I love about human beings. It's like, yeah, this is a big problem. World trade is crashing to a halt. But look, I can fly around the plane. Isn't that cool? So, human error. We're probably, unless you're involved in what went on in the two companies involved, we're never really going to know the truth of what happened there. Was it a pilot error? Was it the captain's error? There is a massive amount of NDAs on that. What we can be absolutely certain of, though, is a human being made a mistake somewhere. Right? And it had a massive consequence. The problem I have, and especially talking to a lot of people who do security incident management, is they see this as the end point. In my experience, and this is not just at the bank, but also talking to people who do my job in a lot of other places, security awareness programs, security culture change programs, whatever you want to call them, go through the metronome that everybody does. This is useless. You can't patch stupid. It's an ID 1OT problem. PEBCAC problem exists between keyboard and chair. There's nothing you can do about it, John. Over to, John, just go and educate them. That'll fix everything. And obviously, the truth, realistically, is somewhere in the middle. And one of the reasons that we have this metronome, and especially what goes over to one extent or the other, is because we don't talk about human error enough, in especially cybersecurity. The number of instant review panels I've seen where the outcome is human error, and then usually, John, can you go and fix that, please? When actually what we need to talk about is what kind of error. And this is not a new field. This is something that the safety field have been working on for decades. I'm going to give you a few suggested readings. It is not homework, it is suggested readings. I'm going to give you some book references as I go through, things that have helped me come to this formulation. But one of my main ones is a guy called James Reason, who's a researcher and a doctor in human error. So he works on why people make mistakes and slips and lapses, because they're not the same thing. And this is one of the things he says. So a mistake, if you follow Reason's model, is a knowledge-based error. Great, I can help with that. I'm a teacher of sorts. I can educate. Somebody doesn't know how to do something or doesn't know that something's a problem, I can help with that. A slip isn't a knowledge-based error. A slip is when somebody knows the process that they're trying to carry out, but they get it wrong for some reason. It's quite often it's a perception error. They didn't see the full picture. And a lapse is exactly what happened to my wife and exactly what happened to me when I left the keys in the door. There is a step in the process, and we forgot a step. What was that step? Take the key out of the door. Now, what had actually happened to my wife the night before is we'd been bringing the kids in, the cat had run out, we'd been trying to catch it, and we closed the door. And I locked it with my key. So, you know, house is secure. We hadn't accounted, and I do mean we, because I didn't challenge her on it. I hadn't accounted for, shouldn't there be 2 sets of keys inside the house at this stage of the process? Maybe we should have had a checklist. But I love this quote because I think this is really key to security. Operators tend to be the inheritors of system defects created by poor design, incorrect installation, faulty maintenance, and bad management decisions. Think about SolarWinds. SolarWinds CEO and says, ladies and gentlemen, obviously we take your data very seriously. Personal opinion, not the opinion of the Bank of England or any other organisation which I may be affiliated with. We take your data very seriously. It was the intern what done it. The intern set the password on the external FTP server to SolarWinds 123. It's their fault. Really? Why was the intern able to do that? Was the intern shown what a good password was? Was there a second level of check? Do you check that your passwords aren't set to SolarWinds 123 at the point of creation? None of those points are the intern's fault. They talk, personal opinion, to the culture and to the technological setup of SolarWinds at that time. The intern set the password to SolarWinds 123 because the intern was allowed to set the password to SolarWinds123 and wasn't shown that that wasn't a good idea. And this is the point that I really want to make. It's really easy to say it's the intern's fault. It was this single person who made a mistake. They set the password to this, they did that. But if we are not looking at security holistically, then what are we doing? We are going to continue to have the operator, the end user, being blamed for things when they are realistically the end of a chain of errors. Let's talk about phishing. One of my things, my MSc thesis is actually on phishing susceptibility. So it's a subject I can talk about for a very long time. I'm not going to. But let me just point this out. A phishing email that's in my inbox has beaten all of your technical defenses. If I click on it, I'm just another person that it's fooled. And yet, when organizations have, or 3 clicks and you're out policy, they don't apply them to the person who configures the mail gateway, I notice. And I'm not saying they should. We accept that the mail gateway can't stop 100% of everything. So why do we put more pressure on our staff, our colleagues, our end users? What's the joke? There's only 2 professions which talk about users, IT and drug dealers. Is that where we want to be? So all I'm saying, I'm not saying people don't make mistakes. I'm not saying there shouldn't be consequences. I think we need to start having the conversation about why did these things happen? Because when it comes down to it, human beings, all of us, are inherently programmed to work in a certain way. I'm not going to go into detail with Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a fascinating book. I'd recommend you read it. But basically what it says is we are cognitive misers. This thing takes a lot of energy, and therefore we want to take shortcuts wherever we can. We follow heuristic pathways. It's a better way than saying shortcuts, isn't it? We do the things that are like the things we've done before, as much as we can. Because working it out from core principles every time is tiring. So we have to accept that that's going to happen. You're not expected to read this slide. There is a link there, and when we share the slides, I'm very happy to put the link in the notes. There are 180 different cognitive biases that have been identified. They classify into basically 4 main categories. Too much information. I've got to make a choice on, and I'm being overwhelmed with information. Not enough, meaning I can't work out the differences between these things. I've got to act fast. That's a really key one. My boss is screaming at me to get that thing out the door before 5 o'clock. And when it's not clear what I should remember. And these are, to an extent, hardwired into all of us. Not all of us are prone to all of them. But there's one particular cognitive bias that I want to call out, because security staff fall prey to this all the time. It's called the curse of knowledge. This is Chip Heath, and again, another great book, Made to Stick, which is about emotional connection, actually encouraging change. But he says, when we're given knowledge, it's impossible to imagine what it's like to lack that knowledge. Now, I would challenge that word impossible. I would say it's very hard. I actually started my training and education as a martial arts instructor many, many years ago. So I've very much a physical approach to teaching. And one of the key things in any martial art that you do is what's called beginner's mind. Can you get yourself into beginner's mind? What is it like? You've been training on this thing for 7, 8 years. Your body works in a certain way. What is a beginner going to do in this circumstance? And if you can, it's very, very difficult. If you can, then that helps. It has to be the same in security. Because we say things like, oh, passwords are easy. I don't understand why people have such stupid passwords. Because it needs to be 15 characters long. It needs to be uppercase, lowercase. It has to have a single character in it. Spaces, apparently, to Microsoft, spaces are great. Nobody's searching for spaces. You should definitely use those. Oh, and by the way, you know we told you had to change them every 3 months. Well, and now it's a month. No, now you don't have to change them because NCC have changed their guidance. And we've all internalized that because we work in security and it's important to us. But the curse of knowledge says that we can't imagine what it's like, or it's very difficult for us to imagine what it's like not to have that information. I was doing tech support for my dad, And this is before I noticed the joys of TeamViewer, which has made our relationship so much better, because now I can see what it says on the screen. And he said, John, it says something like this on this error message. I'm doing this by phone. He says something like this on this error message. And I said, oh, no, Dad, don't summarize it. Please just read it out to me. You don't know what you're looking for. You're summarizing it. I'm not getting the information I need to help you. So he read it out, and that was fine. And a few weeks later, he rang and he said, John, I've had another error. What should I do? And I said, just read it out. So he started reading the entirety of the blue screen of death text, including all the hex codes. And I said, no, Dad, you can just summarize that. And he said, how am I supposed to know when? He's right. He's not stupid. My dad's been working with computers longer than I have, but always as an end user. How does he know when to summarize what I need him to do? And that's the curse. That's me exhibiting that curse of knowledge. Because I know, oh, it's a blue screen of death. I can't do anything about it. Just hit return. We'll fix the problem underneath it when we get into the system. But he didn't know that. We're also really bad at risk assessment. I think if you asked most people for a gut reaction, what's scarier, a shark or a mosquito, most people would say sharks. And yet mosquitoes kill more people every day, planet-wide, than sharks have killed in 100 years. Here, in London today, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the risk of me dying from a shark attack is only if there's one flying above and the plane cracks in half and it drops through the roof onto my head. Whereas I might get bitten by a mosquito. I don't know, it's November, probably not. And yet, we overestimate the visceral. We overestimate the things which are in front of us. We underestimate things where the consequences are far away. Being bitten by a mosquito, I get bitten by mosquitoes quite a lot. I haven't died. And think about clicking on a phishing link. It's something you do every day. And the bad thing that might happen, you might never see. Even if that's the way that ransomware gets into your system, you might never see that because they sensibly go and attack somewhere else first, so you can't trace the point of infection. And then there's this guy, the obligatory at this stage, hacker in the hoodie slide. I'm using it ironically and as a meta-commentary now, obviously, not just... But we have bad guys out there who are trying to get our colleagues to make mistakes and slips and lapses. So this isn't a level playing field. When we talk to our colleagues, there is someone out there who is trying to trip them up. And sometimes they mean to do it. Now, sometimes maybe that's your malicious insider, maybe that's the disgruntled employee. Or maybe it's the person whose business model depends on them doing the thing that they need to do. If I go to this gentleman here and say, duck, you fool, you're about to get a custard pie in your face, he's not going to pay attention to me. Why? Because his business model is taking custard pies in the face. He's at a charity event. He's even got his endpoint protection sorted. He has done his risk mitigation. He is happy with his residual risk. And if I try to change that, I am not helping. Someone very wise once said to me, anytime you see somebody bypass security, it means that security is getting in the way. Anytime you see somebody deliberately try and do something that you don't think is right, there's a pretty good chance it's because your system is stopping them doing what they need. And so when we talk at the bank, we sometimes talk about least worst decision making. Let's not talk about what's the best case. Sometimes there isn't a best case. What's the least worst thing you can do? What's the best thing you can do in this circumstance? Because we have to understand that security is situational. We have to understand what happened in that moment. So, what should we do? Are humans the weakest link? We've got all of these problems. Are humans actually the weakest link? I work very closely with Lance. He's one of my favourite people. And he very wisely says humans aren't the weakest link. They're the primary attack vector now. You look at how much money we've poured into securing the endpoint over the last 20 years, from the points where you could put a Microsoft XP system online and it would be compromised somewhere within an hour of first pinging onto the internet, to now that just doesn't happen. Microsoft, Apple, Google, all of them work very hard on their operating systems to make sure that they are much more secure by default. What have we done to help secure our colleagues in that time? How much does it cost to secure a laptop every year compared to your security awareness training budget? I mean, I'm going to say at the bank, they're not balanced. We've got a big team. I've got 3 people on my team for about 5,000 people. That's really big for security awareness. It's nowhere near what we spend on securing laptops, servers, etc., etc. So what can we do? Just coming into the end now. Number one is we have to listen to our users, even I'm doing it. We have to listen to our colleagues when technology gets in the way. This is a screenshot from a payments system in a well-known bank, international bank, where if you fill out where it's got the principal there, one thing happens. If you put that code into 2 other boxes, another thing happens. The problem is that if you fill it out here, you pay out $750 million that you didn't want to, and if you put it into the 3 boxes, you pay out the $7.8 million that you intended to. Now, $750 million is quite a lot. We should have some mitigatory controls around that, John. Yes, we should. Why don't we have a 4 eyes check? No, I've got a better idea. Let's have a 6 eyes check. Let's have the manager sign off on this decision, and let's have their manager sign off on this decision, which is exactly what happened, and all 3 of them got it wrong. I submit to evidence, Your Honour, that this is a confusing system. And if 3 people who are doing this job can make that mistake without an error message popping up saying, I'd even take Clippy at this point. Hi there, you look like you're paying out $750 million. Would you like some help with that? Something to say, this might not be a good idea. So we listen to our errors. We don't always look at fixing the people. We look at investing and fixing the technology, looking at UX design, looking at all of those things that we've learned over the last 30 years to make this better. We need to fix processes. There's a great book, Checklist Manifesto. One of my favorite things in there, they talk about the diagnostically significant question. So you've got a checklist. If you're in a medical surgery, and you go through, and you go, fantastic, everyone, we've just cut off the left leg, and it turns out they came in with appendicitis. So the diagnostically significant question, what are we doing here today? But once you've got that, checklists help. When the plane went down on the Hudson, Sully still went through his checklist. You can hear it in the transcript. When the Bank of Bangladesh was hacked, the people in the New York Federal Reserve bounced the first $1 billion worth of payment requests because they were incorrect syntax in the SWIFT code. They'd spelt things wrong, they'd got things wrong. The answer came back an hour later, and they said, these aren't correctly syntaxed. The answer came back an hour later with them correctly syntaxed, and they went, yep, pay those, until they suddenly went, something else is going on here. This is a diagnostically significant question. What time is it when somebody's coming back at you? Because if someone in New York had thought, or even if they had those cool clocks across the top that went, wow, in Bangladesh it's 4 in the morning. I don't know any bankers who are actually responding at 4 in the morning. If they'd understood that, they'd have known that an hour's return time for that question was not appropriate. They would have expected actually 6 or 7 hours before those payments came in again. But they didn't, because their checklist said, check for veracity. It didn't say, check for geographical location. We don't get the checklists right, we don't help the people. And then finally, let's treat our colleagues like adults. This goes back to the story of the key right at the beginning. There's no point in telling my wife off because I've done the same thing. There's no point in telling her because she knew not to leave the key in the door. Let's accept it, let's move on. Nothing bad happened. I've been listening to a great podcast by a guy called Brian Bushwood called The Best Con in the World. And it's all about a social engineering attack against the German army, dropping a body out of a plane. But in that, he says quite often, cons don't fool us because we're stupid. They fool us because we're human. And that's the point that I want you to take away from this. All of us will make errors at some point or another. A secure culture is one that is resilient to that. That's my point. I've got 2 minutes left. Thank you all very much.
John, great stuff. Excellent start to the morning. We have a question on Slido, so let me read that out. Given what you said, is there a role for policy in security?
Absolutely. No question about it. Because how else do we tell our staff what is good and bad behaviour? What is best behaviour? So policy is there to set boundaries, to say what you can do and what you can't do. And there will always be somebody who deliberately chooses, they're that malicious insider, whatever it is. You have to have policy there. The guy who was arrested and charged for manipulating LIBOR, the first thing he said in his trial was, there was no policy against manipulating LIBOR in any of the banks that I worked at. And he was right, in the same way that there wasn't a policy about ignoring gravity and not falling downstairs. So policies do need to be there. They are just not the be-all and end-all of a good security culture. At best, they're the start of a compliance culture. Once we've got a compliant culture, once we've got a workforce who know what is good and bad for our organisation, I would strongly suggest that's what we build on. So yes, they're absolutely fundamental, but they're not the end point.
Very good. John, a question from me, which for those of you that missed the beginning, probably will sound a little bit confusing. But do you have what it takes to eradicate leaving keys indoors?
No. No, not at all. Because the one thing that comes out of James Reason's work is human error is inevitable. That's why we do defence in depth. That's why we've got a bolt on the inside of the door. That's why if we need to, if we thought there was sufficient risk, we can change the locks. It's annoying. The best thing, the cheapest thing, it's all that shift left stuff, right? The cheapest thing is don't leave the key in the door. But we accept that it's going to happen, and that's why we put other mitigations in place. I said right at the beginning, it's this metronome. Awareness doesn't work, awareness fixes everything. Awareness doesn't work, awareness fixes everything. It is a part of what you need to have a secure culture. People, process, and technology. All I'm saying is don't forget the people.
John, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Excellent stuff. Okay, let's keep moving. We have Adam Dara next up from Zero Fox. He's going to talk and take us into the dark web. Adam is Director of Threat Intelligence Services at Zero Fox. Adam, please come to the stage.
That applause walking to the stage. Jeez. That was a joke. The very nice gentleman that was just up here, your notes are up here, so I got some corporate secrets. Yeah, if that's... Some things are fun, they're open source. All right. Sure. Excellent. It's really cool to be here, everyone. My name is Adam Dara. The very kind MC is the third person on planet Earth that pronounced my last name correctly. It is Dara, like Sarah. I think in the old country it was Dara. We don't know. We're doing research on this very topic, so thank you very much. Adam Dara with Zero Fox. Before Zero Fox, I was at a three-letter agency in the United States of America, in the Virginia one. And so I spent my career doing Russia stuff. I was an analyst and something called a targeter, and it is wonderful to be back in Europe, back in the UK, where I, a few times in my life, had the opportunity to collaborate on very meaningful projects with your great nation, and it's always an honor to be here with my distant cousins. So thank you for having me again. I want to start with a couple of things. Number one, I want to demystify the dark web a little bit and talk about some of the rules of the road for the presentation today. That I'm really, really glad I'm following the Bank of England and its emphasis on the human factor, because what we're going to talk about today is the human intelligence side of cyber intelligence. It is a tool to have in your toolkit if your security posture is at a point where it needs weird stuff to be returned to you, weird stuff to be actioned at your behest, or if you've got a really creative idea you want to bounce off people that are by nature strange and forward-leaning. We are the type of people that meddle in weird. So we're very open. We've heard it all, and I'm going to show you why in just a second. So the dark web marketplace is very simple. It is held to the same demands of supply and demand that we law-abiding people are also forced to abide by. So we have the consumer who is shopping online. You have businesses who are handling data, their own data, their consumers' data. Well, so in the above-ground economy, we click through things that we agree to because we just want to read that page, or we really want our iPhone or Android phone to just work. Enough of all that. So we give our consent to have our stuff, our digital footprint, brokered. Okay? We may not like it, but it is legal. Okay? And we are consenting to it. Well, there's a whole other ecosystem, I think. There it is. There's a whole other ecosystem. Now, through human error, a security individual having a bad day, a cloud engineer who forgot to click a button to secure their public-facing IP space. Think of all the things. Well, we do not give our consent to have people, individuals, take it from us without our knowledge. Okay? And so all these really interesting things happen. I would submit that hacking is kind of out of style now. You don't need to hack anymore. You can use legal scanning tools and then find open buckets and take those buckets of data and resell them to other brokers. It is a plague upon our houses, all of us. So, bad guys get it. Yes, I just want to acknowledge there are terrorists, there are human traffickers in the underground economy. They are not well regarded in the spaces where we play. We don't want to deal with them because we have to commit heinous crimes against the most vulnerable of our population to even gain entry into these circles. So we're not that weird. We are on the correct side of that issue, in my opinion. And may all the gods bless anybody who does that work to eradicate that scourge. But we do not do that. So we are primarily focused on infiltrating humans and hacking humans and their circles. We have well-developed aliases that convince other interesting characters that we're just like them, man. You, me, same, right? You, me, same, let's be friends. We prove ourselves in legal ways that we are one of them, and we continue building those relationships. And we play here. We play here to see what happens. So, bad guys take our stuff. They begin reselling over and over and over and over again. Basically, once your data has hit a dark web marketplace, it is too late. It has been already brokered many times over and abused ad nauseum. So it's quite sad. But, so the sweet spot is you want to be at like the beginning of the spring, right? Like at the very beginning, you want your straw like closer to the source of the water instead of downstream when it's not too late. For the record, it's not too late. Don't lose hope. Everything's fine, kind of. But yes, that's where it is. So this is, and the dark web is interesting. It is a place for all kinds. Everybody has a seat at the table on the dark web. It is a place for privacy advocates. It is a place for politically oppressed peoples, sexual minorities in other countries, political minorities or unpopular political opinions. This is a place for people to gather, talk, and just be friends without all the silly nonsense that comes with living in a less free society, like prison or worse, right? So this is what we do. So the human intelligence angle is simply, we go out at your behest and we do stuff for you, okay? So to have that in your toolkit, to have a guy, right? You call it your guy and say, this thing happened, Adam. I need to know more about it. There's an individual saying interesting things about my company. They're making claims. I need to find out more, okay? Or in some cases, when we're lucky and we've penetrated the correct individual or circle of individuals, we can get out ahead of it. In other words, we're tipped to something ahead of time, which does happen, shockingly, from time to time. We are tipped to data breaches before they happen, or we're tipped to tools that are being developed, being aimed at certain companies, software, all that. Now, so that is, in a nutshell, what human intelligence can do to bolster any security posture, right? So we're not making any claims that AI is like old-fashioned, like that internet that's going to go out of style. The human advantage in the underground economy is paramount. You have to have reputation. You have to have some bona fides to flex to get, because at the end of the day, there is an individual, there is a human being behind a keyboard making decisions. There's a human being behind a keyboard who is perhaps lonely and needs a friend. There's a human being behind a keyboard who relies on other close associates to carry out certain tasks, okay? There are human beings in a closed circle who get tipped to data, get tipped to tools before it hits the marketplace, okay? And the idea is to insert ourselves as close as we can to the direct source of the bad thing that's happening, okay? Bless you. And so, for example, we were partnering with a major online retailer, and we were trying to smoke out some insiders. There were insiders cooperating with Chinese and Russian language underground actors. We carefully went out in a cover-consistent manner and began proving ourselves in these arenas. Eventually gaining the trust of a handful of these individuals who were cooperating with insiders to rip off the consumer and to rip off the company. And as a matter of fact, and we were in close contact with all the appropriate people. It was kept close hold. Only a few people knew we were doing it. And they were able to identify, using their magic machines, identify the insider and the communications with the threat actor. And it was so interesting that we actually got refunded by the threat actor who says, hey, I don't know what happened, man. Like, they scooped up my insider, so here's your money back, right? So we were able to prove ourselves. They weren't on to us, okay? Our operative teams are fantastic, and we were able to be like them, talk like them. We have the language ability, and most importantly, the cultural acumen to blend in, right? Talk like them, which is awful, by the way. By the way, it's awful and unpleasant. Kind of fun in that dark kind of way. But yes, we can switch worlds, right? We can live in the polite world, and then we switch into like the really awful kind of D-bag world, rather immature. But then we can click it back on and become intelligence professionals, and speak to civilized people. So it's really fun, actually. So in another instance, one of our clients was contacted by a journalist who claimed that a threat actor had been in contact with them and said, hey, we're on your network. I've been contacted by this hacking group. Hacking group. So scary. Hacking group. They got us. A hacking group contacted a journalist and, and said, hey, we're on their servers. We got them. So they need to, they need to pay us or whatever, right? And so the journalist was like, I'm going to print with this. I'm going to print with this unless you guys can do something. Well, our team jumped into action. It was in a part of the world where we had excellent coverage. As a matter of fact, our team went out, contacted this guy that they didn't like. He was held in low regard in this community. And so we were able to assure our big client that it's not you, but we know who it is. We know who they have, and it's not you. And so the moral of the story is it ended well. We were able to then pass on this intelligence to the firm that was actually affected by this hack and bring peace of mind to our client and to the victim. So that's these are the things that a human being, like AI is cool. AI is super cool. I love computers, okay? But what I love about cybersecurity is that, well, there's a lot of things I love, okay? But everyone has a place at the table. We all have a place at the table. We can lift where we stand, man. I am basically a Neanderthal when it comes to certain technical networking things, right? I don't consider myself like an IT security guy because I think that's separate from cyber intel. Like, protecting your networks, like, yeah, okay, I'm cool, important, awesome, check. I agree. I'm on board. I'm on board. I'm on board. But I'm a humanities guy, man. Majored in Russian. I like thinking thoughts. I like communicating my thoughts, in a dramatic way. And so there's a place at the table for non-technical people. Isn't that awesome? We're such a cool industry. Just love it. And I even have the opportunity to try to translate from engineer to try to translate to engineering, and then from engineering to client, and it's a lot of fun. So, as a matter of fact, funny side story. So actually, when I was talking to my operative team about this alleged data breach, I said, "Hey man, so what's going on? What did you guys find out?" Adam, everything is proper. I'm like, I need more, bro. I need more than that. You need to tell me exactly. He's like, no, everything fine. He's not real. He's not. Anyway, it was. So even sometimes I have to translate from operative innuendo to human digestible content. So those are some war stories, man. It really happens. We're out there doing stuff, man. We're turning stuff. It's fun. So why human intelligence? Why does that matter? What can we do? We have all manner of clients that have experienced it. There are teams, these poor security teams, I use teams plural, but it's like one person who sits down and they're, and they're like, computers, you got that? Computers, keep us safe, change our passwords and write policy and stuff. And so we have these, varying levels of industry, and in these large to medium to small who are, and we have security professionals that are highly sophisticated, holding down the fort, man. They're the only thing standing in between, these degenerates and the above ground people that dwell in the light, and they come out to just wreak havoc and just make they're just mean. Is that appropriate to say? It's just mean. They're mean. And so where do you start? Where do you start? You want to wade into this, and I think you should. I think it's completely appropriate to start one of these things and perhaps start wading into the waters of a human intelligence capability. Again, it's not the end-all be-all. Technology-based solutions are real, and they're wonderful. A couple of suggestions, I would say. One, lift where you stand. Start where you are. What do you have? You always, if you have a very bright individual or team of individuals who understand and know security, lean on them, ask them, trust them. Ask them, hey, what do you think about this dark web thing? Is it like is it like the real internet? Is it going to go away, or should we have a presence there? Right? You know your attack vectors. You know where you're, and you may be in an industry where these guys don't matter as much, right? You don't maybe fancy yourself a target of the Russian-speaking, Chinese-speaking. I'm using the three kings and queens of the underground economy are the English-speaking world, the Russian-speaking world, and the Chinese-speaking world. So that's why I'm not picking on them. I happen to really respect their capabilities, and they're very interesting. As a people experiment, they're very interesting, but doesn't excuse their bad behavior. So standing this up, trust your security people. See what happens, right? Ask them, have you heard about this? Start with what you have. Start with the team that you have, and see what they have to say. They may know a lot more than you think. Try it out. Find somebody. There are some phenomenal people in our space. The finance industry is I'm in awe. Do you know? And I didn't know this until I started traveling again, a week and a half ago. that banks, I don't even have to fill out a form anymore. They know where I'm going. Like, I used to have to fill out a form saying, I'm going to be, I usually live in South Dakota, America. It's in the middle north. Nobody goes there. Don't worry about it. So I live in a place where nobody goes. And so, I used to get my credit cards declined when I was in Texas or something. Like, oh, Adam never goes to Texas, right? You didn't fill out the form. But the security that the finance industry does now, I don't have to fill out any forms, man. The robots know where I'm at. And I don't. It's easier. It's a technology-based solution, which is cool. But I had a thing. There was a direction I was going. Just wanted to compliment you guys on that credit card thing. I've been trying to find the gal that invented that, because that's fantastic. I don't have to fill out a form anymore. I just think it's wonderful. But but there is so much time and attention paid to the financial and banking industries in the deep and dark web. It's overwhelming. So I will caution, it's very overwhelming. And that's where the expertise on regarding who is who, what does it mean to have credibility, in which forms, who is the correct person to speak to in a forum, where are the proper forums where real things happen, right? So that expertise is very important. So they are relentless. They will not stop. And give it a try. Give it a try. Play out there for a little bit. Give it a try. And I think you'd be. It is overwhelming, so please don't stress out. I'm not here to do that or scare you. I don't believe in fear porn. I don't like that. But let's. It can be done. And just think of it as one tool in your toolkit. It's not like the end-all, be-all. Like, hey, trust me. Like, we're gonna do it, man. We're gonna solve it all for you. And we're not. So, anyway, I'm gonna pause there. 10 minutes shy for questions, interruptions. At all. I don't mind hand raising. I can hear you. I have excellent, mildly, no, not really, good hearing. So,
Adam, I'm going to come and join you while we
please do
take some questions. I've got a couple of questions I wouldn't mind asking, but I don't think we've got any on Slido yet. But if you have got
probably
questions,
not.
You can definitely shout those. So I'll come out in a second.
Oh yes, I was hoping Abdul would ask me something.
There we go.
Yeah.
So let me just read this question out. With impersonating and acting like a detective, how do you manage your company and personal ethics switching between dark and light? What a good question.
That's an excellent question. No, I talked to him before. I thought, man, please ask a question. You were the question guy from yesterday with their great questions. Number one, we try not to act like a detective. Because they watch. The forum, a lot of the outrageous behavior on forums is to smoke out civilized people. Civilized people don't belong on these, and they know that. They don't want a civilized, cultured individual, and so they say outrageous things all the time. It's constant. It's constant. And they look for standard operating research procedures, right? So there are plenty of researchers in the world, and they're fantastic. And how hard can it be? You just register for a forum and talk to people, right? Do you use all caps? Do you use punctuation? Do you curse? Do you use ethnic and racial slurs? Do you how dirty are you willing to play? Because if you're not willing to be dirty, you're going to get smoked out. So number one, we don't want to act like a detective. And the second half of that question is excellent. How do you switch between light and dark? Well, one, you can be just numb to everything and just not have a soul. That might be the answer, is just become numb. But quite the opposite, in my opinion, is true. Our operative teams, our analysts are quite the opposite. They have a very firm moral compass, and so they know that, hey, right now I'm this guy. I am just awful. And then, so thankfully I have children. I have 3 children, so I still get to hug and interact with proper humans. proper humans who love me, and so that helps to stay grounded. But yeah, it is a pitfall, Abdul. It is a pitfall. There you are. It is a pitfall, and I've seen people who can't see the difference anymore, and we don't necessarily want to continue being in a partnership with somebody who's lost themselves. So it's that touchy-feely empathy, empath coming out. But yes, it is not easy. It is not easy, but it is worth it. It is worth it.
We'll come to Abdul's second question in a moment. We have a question down here. Yeah. As loud as you can, please,
yes,
sir.
Of course. Sort of interested about the word policy that's been used in security, and in fact, we're now talking about the dark web. Is there a policy in terms of communication and how threat actors communicate? And what I mean by is there are certain types of routines that perhaps happen, off digital platforms that, the way that they're talking to each other about intelligence or a breach or something like that. Is there like a routine there that you have to become part of, and how does that sort of work?
Yeah. So the question is great. So like, what you want is to get them off the forum, because that's where the magic happens, is to get them off forum and be their off forum friend, not just on their forum friend. But as far as policy goes, we try to be as natural as we can. We make sure that we've established ourselves. Oftentimes, you'll go into these forums, and you'll get a post. Say, who in here knows how to make a suitcase bomb? We're like, oh, hey, FBI guy. Like, hey, who here knows how to hack? It's like, oh, gotcha. Yeah, poison, right? You'll get banned from the forum, or just get made fun of and trolled relentlessly. We have a playbook of, I hate term best practices. That just seems like so arrogant. Like, what do we know? Like current, we'll just say we have a playbook of current practices instead of like best practices, because they're criminals. They make liars out of you in like 5 minutes. I've already been made a liar several times now up here speaking. They've already evolved and moved on to something else. Maybe they're polite now. They say please and thank you and use colons. I don't know. Or semicolons instead of a period, But yeah, no, it is important. We do have a rule book that we follow as far as like being technically safe, operationally safe, keeping the distance between the company we work for. Like, so there's like, we don't have any affiliation, but there's no affiliation between Adam Dara and Operative X. We keep a distance. There's no affiliation between company, Acme Banking of Excellence and the operative, right? Like, we don't want them to know that we're out there for Acme Banking of Excellence. We don't want them to know that, right? Because that's, again, like, it doesn't keep anyone safe.
Adam, I want to get through.
I know.
As many of these questions as I can.
Cut me off, man. I'm too much. It's ridiculous.
You can take it.
It's born like this.
Before we started, Adam said to me, I'm going to need a lapel mic because I move around a little bit. Fidgety was the word you used, and you've been true to your word. It's fantastic to watch. I'm going to jump to John Scott's question, so our first speaker of the day. How do you deal with people's natural tendency to boast and big themselves up on hacker forums? How much verification do you have to do?
We just had an experience with this like last week, and people on like I call them like the civilized people, like the normies, like are just still like blown away by. So that's an excellent question. It is the question of questions, like because like we always tell people they're lying, like they're criminals, they're lying, they're degenerate criminals who have no souls, maybe. So that's the thing. It's too much intrigue. There's a lot of intrigue, and they love it, and they know that regular people, regular civilized people, get stressed out by intrigue. Okay, it's like, but they said it. But they said it, Adam. They said they were okay. Anyway, so what we do is, again, it's have you established yourself and your alias, and have you. Can you get them off a public soapbox within the forum? Can you pull them away and talk to them away from their friends that they're trying to impress, For example, there was an outrageous claim made against one of the world's most awesome companies, okay? Like, we got your HR stuff, man. We're on it. We're on your stuff. And so we pulled out we pulled out the big ones, the big squirt guns on this one, and we approached this individual with our most serious alias, right? And the alias got back to me and said, "Scammer, guy's nonsense. Like he's nonsense." Well, a rival faction, one of our competitors, worthy competitor for the record. Like I'm not. This is not. I'm not like I love the crap out of our competitors. We're all on the same team. all on the same team. They had a different experience. They interacted. The bad guy interacted with them. He wouldn't even interact with us because we approached him properly. Like, we approached him like we were the kings of that forum. And he didn't want anything to do with us. So if you approach them incorrectly, they're like, oh, sucker. All right? So it's always a trick. These guys are always a trick. Turns out unfortunately, we were correct. And he scammed somebody who was like a criminal king, man. The guy had 6.9 Bitcoin on deposit in the forum. And this little nothing of a degenerate scammed a criminal kingpin. It's like, sleep well, brother. Good luck, man. Change your address. Turn off your phone. Anyway.
Adam, let me ask you one more. We are fast approaching 10 past.
I know. Apologies.
Going to have to move on. But I do want to ask you one more question. If you answer it relatively quickly, please. And forgive me if I didn't get to the other questions. So the one at the bottom, how far do you think technology can help defend dark web threats versus human defense investigation? Is the balance correct?
Number one, there's no such thing as balance. Number two, they're always going to be ahead of us. Number three, technology is awesome, and it's going to do more great things. Four, you will never outsmart a robot, as of right now, will never outsmart a human behind a keyboard who's got a postdoc in being bad.
Adam, thank you very much. Cheers, thank you. Wow, let's take a breath. Excellent stuff. We are going to keep moving. The next session we've got is keeping up with the speed of change, which feels very appropriate. We have Angie Johnson-DeWitt, who is Cloud-Enabled Business Transformation Head of Function at Lloyds Banking Group. I hope I got that job title correct. Please welcome her to the stage.
Cheers, thanks everyone. So yes, as mentioned, you'll hear me okay? I can't. Yeah, okay, good. My name's Ange Johnson-DeWitt, and as just mentioned, I work at Lloyds Banking Group on their Cloud-Enabled Business Transformation, and I'm a Head of Function. Today, I'm going to be talking about keeping up with the speed of change in financial services and technology, and I'm going to be looking at 5 points. The first one's around IoT and intuitive technologies. The second one is around a potential over-reliance in technology in the industry. The third one's around overcoming past mistakes. You could all hear me, you said yes. Thanks. The fourth one's around the potential to centralise fraud and risk functions. And then there's a few points that if we're going to be talking about tech in financial services, I've just got to mention. So there's just some final points there at the end I've really got to say on the topic. So fantastic. So kicking us off. So impact of continued growth of IoT and other intuitive technologies on the security and financial sector. So what are we talking about when we talk about IoT? And I'm going to tackle it from 2 dimensions. One is what it means to us as humans, and the other is what it means to the industry. So as humans, just to remind everyone, IoT is all about things like home thermostats, home security systems, fitness devices, this watch I'm wearing, the Garmin watch, wearables, smartphones, tablets, etc. So all of those would encompass IoT. Within financial services, the types of IoT that you might have would be innovative products that leverage IoT. So you might be using new channels within your financial services firm, leveraging these IoT endpoints, risk management via IoT and processes, and then you're also using it for identification and authorization. So I think a lot of us have now seen that pretty much accessing a lot of the sites, you don't need to remember your password. You can just sign in with, for example, Google or Facebook, and then you do need your biometrics to be able to sign in. So that's all examples of IoT. So what can these IoT devices do? And that's really important because that sort of helps us understand the risk associated with them. So they can, this one here, for example, will tell you my step count, it'll tell you my heart rate, a huge number of details on me, for example, which is helpful for me, but if it got hacked, that probably isn't so great. It can do geolocation, so a phone can track where you are. You've got payments that can be done via the IoT, so by the phone, for example. Obviously, you've got the biometrics that's sitting on your phone, and customer communications. So they're all the types of data that can be sort of sent and received by these IoT devices. Within the home sensors, you've also got the smart meters, home sensors and car sensors. Particularly in the insurance industry, these car sensors are getting used to help understand what the premium should be for a car, for example, and if there's been an accident with a car, then that can be helped by the IoT devices as well. There's also health sensors and supply chain sensors. So it's a pretty broad topic, IoT, it'd be fair to say. And so I think the question is, how does this impact the financial services sector, specifically around security? So I think everyone's heard of the idea of perimeter security. So your perimeter of your organisation in the old world might have been your data centre, and that's where all of your compute storage and networking was all being done in your own data centre, and you might have had some specific channels that you were using, and that might have been, for example, a web channel for your customer, maybe a phone channel, but it was sort of a finite number of channels. With the use of the IoT, you've got a plethora of channels and a plethora of ways in which you might want to distribute your products. What that's ultimately doing is broadening your perimeter, your security perimeter, and broadening the surface area over which you need to be both understanding, managing and controlling with respect to a security standpoint. So I think that's the most important point, is that this broadening of the perimeter. So what does this mean for us as if you're in security, for example? Really making sure you understand what's going on. The first thing to doing any problem solving is understanding the problem, understanding the current state, understanding how your customer is using these devices, understanding how the products are being used, understanding how you are using the products, and making sure that everything you are doing is explicit as opposed to implicit, and is conscious as opposed to unconscious, and making sure that you're really addressing all of your estate and you completely understand it, you know where your weak spots are, and then once you know where your weak spots are, you can set about addressing them. So that's that with respect to IoT and intuitive tech in the financial sector from my point of view. Moving on to the second question, is there an over-reliance of tech in financial services? So I'm in tech in financial services, have been for many, many years, over a decade. My personal view is no, there's not an over-reliance in technology within financial services. The way in which that I would define over-reliance would be if the use of our technology is creating a significant risk to the bank or to the financial services organisation. If the technology is creating a significant risk, then I would say that is an over-reliance. So I would just say that over-reliance means there's a huge amount of risk associated with it. I don't think that's the case. I think the big risks that we've got when it comes to technology is, and these are the risks that most boards care about, is technology outage, cyber breach, reg breach, and not achieving the strategic objectives. And I think if you ask most financial services boards what are the things that they're worried about, I'd say those four would definitely be up there. There might be some others that they may group up there, but those are the big four in my mind that any board member is particularly worried about, and rightly so. So let's just look at the tech usage across those three. So tech outage. So yes, tech outage is still a concern. It's not that far long ago when we've had examples where ATMs haven't been able to work and people haven't been able to access their money because of a tech outage. So it is a concern. I think that every organisation, every financial services organisation understands that it's a concern and is very keen to address it. And there's many, many initiatives to try and fix anything that might cause a technology outage. And let's be real, we're generally talking about legacy tech and data in incumbent banks, or we're talking about organisations that are moving too quickly and are introducing errors into their code base potentially. So as I mentioned, it is a concern and it is a risk, definitely, but it is a risk that is very well understood and is very well managed. The second one would be cyber breach. They say that there's two kinds of CSOs, Chief Security Officers. There's the kind of Chief Security Officer who knows they've had a breach, and there's the kind of Chief Security Officer who doesn't yet know that they've had a breach. So I think cyber breach is definitely a concern, but again, this is This is a concern at the board level, the C-suite, and right the way through the entire organisation. And there are a number of things in place, there's a number of actions in place, processes in place, people who are continuously being highly vigilant to protect the bank from cyber breach. So I don't think that we've got an over-reliance on tech that's causing an issue within cyber breach. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about is reg breach. I think not achieving strategic objectives is a concern. If organisations can't move with the times and can't achieve the objectives that they're setting themselves, they'll, certainly in my sector, they'll end up with a Section 166, which nobody wants. But I think reg breach is probably also a concern. So what's the regulator concerned about? So they're concerned about the same things: tech outage, cyber breach. They're also concerned about the customer being treated fairly. So, but again, I think most organisations and all organisations are very wary about what the regulator wants, very keen to meet the regulator's requirements, to understand what the regulator's trying to do, and to help the regulator, because the regulator sometimes is doing things for the first time as well. So help the regulator understand how they can respond and how they can act. So from my point of view, no, I don't think there's an over-reliance of technology in financial services. There's a lot of technology in financial services, but I don't think it causes a risk to the sector, significant risk to the sector, other than the risks that everybody's already aware of and is managing carefully. So moving on to our third question, how can the industry overcome past mistakes when it comes to smart tech? So if we talk about smart tech, we're talking about distributed ledger technology or blockchain, IoT again, augmented reality. So from my point of view, I'm not aware, and maybe you guys might be, but I'm not aware of any major catastrophes that have occurred because we've been using distributed ledger technology, IoT, or augmented reality. IoT may be, from a security standpoint, when you think about, for example, organisations that have been breached from a cyber point of view through an air conditioning application or a fish tank application, which seems to be the case. So it's definitely broadening the perimeter there. That's definitely something to be concerned about. But from my point of view, I think I'm not aware of any major catastrophes there. But you don't know what you don't know. So if you think back to is it 20 years ago, like the late 90s, when the internet first came out, we were all very excited about the internet. And I was able to email my grandma, and she could get my email within minutes. And for me, this was just the most incredible thing I'd ever seen. Fantastic. But we had no idea about the potential downside of the internet. No idea at all. All we could see was upside. However, you fast forward 20 years, or even 15 years, and you look at, for example, the American election with Hillary Clinton and Trump, and you can quite clearly see that there is a significant downside to the internet whereby people can manipulate Facebook, for example, specifically, to a sort of a negative and non-integrity end. And I think this is potentially the case with some of these things. Augmented reality, just as an example, one of the things they're talking about is you wear these glasses that have got cameras in them, and it's got an earpiece into your ear, and you walk down the street and you see someone and you're like, good, I might know that guy's name. I know this guy, but I don't know his name. I can't remember his name. The glasses clock him, facial recognise him, and then tell you in the earpiece, that's James Stewart. So you're like, hey, James, how's it going? James is thinking, gee, she's got a great memory. But the whole thing's been augmented by the glasses quite clearly. However, is that an invasion of privacy? Does James actually want everybody in the street to know his name whilst they're walking around? Probably not. But I think whilst these things pose a great opportunity, we just need to think through what are the potential drawbacks of some of this tech and how are we going to address it. Okay, great. So the fourth question, I've only got one more after this, is around centralising risk and fraud operations. So this is interesting. So in most organisations, certainly that I've been involved in or looked at, fraud and risk are in separate organisations. The closest I've seen to fraud and risk being together was when in one of the organisations I worked in, they used exactly the same data lake with exactly the same data taxonomy, with exactly the same set of PhDs that were helping the data scientists to trawl and understand all of that data. So with respect to having a centralised data science team, that they kind of did have that. So they were both using the lake to perform their risk and fraud operations separately, but they were together leveraging the same data science and the same data science experts, for example. So I think whilst it's usually separate, there could be an argument for centralising it. So the way in which I would approach that is I would go through the risk functions and processes, looking at level 1, 2 and 3. There's 5 process levels, so going to the first 3 levels of processes within the risk function, looking at the same in the fraud function, and then working out of those processes, which of those processes could be shared, and perhaps you might have fungible resources who could work across both sectors. I'd also be looking at the systems in use and looking at how you might be able to consolidate some of those systems. So, for example, if one team's got a data science software that's different to the other team, maybe you could think about putting them both onto the same software and merging that together. That might also give you some financial benefits as well. So I think there's definitely a potential for them to do that. And as I said, I've seen the data science function in both organisations work together and be helped by each other. But yes, combining them together would probably involve a little bit of homework. I'd love to hear from anyone who's already done it, because it is a novel idea. Okay, cool. So there's a few things I just want to cover. The topic is keeping up with the speed of change in financial services and tech. I just can't end this talk without saying a few things. So financial services in tech, for me, I'm going to talk about 2 things: cloud and AI ML. The reason I'm going to talk about them is because, from my point of view, these are the biggest things, frankly, that are going on at the moment and are predicted to go on in the AI ML. Predicting AI ML, that's kind of ironic. Okay, so for cloud, let's just start with cloud. So I think everyone was running at the cloud in 2019. But I think that everybody has slowed down a little bit. And I think some of the reasons why organisations have slowed down is because they've done their homework and they've worked out a few things. So one British bank worked out that if they were going to API and microservice their entire estate, it was going to take 30 years. So most organisations don't have 30-year transformation programs or 30-year cloud migration programs. So what they then quickly realised is that you cannot move everything to the public cloud. Some things are going to need to stay put, particularly if you're a legacy bank or a legacy incumbent, or an incumbent rather, and you've got lots of legacy tech and data. So that's the first point. One of the British banks, I don't think it was the same one, has in fact zoned their estate, and they've got a transformation zone where everything goes to the public cloud, and they've got an optimisation zone where things are staying put. And that is what we're starting to see. I think the other thing to just keep in mind is that mainframes had their biggest year of sales ever last year. So you can quite clearly see that firms are still investing in mainframes because it's easier so with an out-of-support mainframe, it's easier to get a new mainframe than it is to move an entire mainframe, for example, onto the public cloud. So I think that's an important point to think about. I also think that the regulatory requirements are evolving. So the regulator might have had certain requirements, the EBA outsourcing guidelines, back in 2019. Since then, what the regulators ask on banks and on financial institutions has been evolving. And I think that's also making it a little bit more difficult for the banks and the financial services because they have to understand what the regulator's asking for and then work out how to comply with it. And then by complying with it, may have to go a little bit slower than expected. I think another thing that slowed things down, certainly in 2019, was the Capital One breach. So what happened was, Capital One was with AWS. They'd moved a huge amount of their estate to AWS. An AWS employee had left AWS, so she was an ex-AWS employee. She was able, because she had the know-how, to hack into Capital One, took a whole bunch of customer data, and then tried to offload it on Twitter, which is where the FBI found her. So clever, but not so clever. So when that happened, and I think things like SolarWinds as well, that also has slowed everyone down. So instead of accepting whole heaps of self-identified issues, folks are starting to slow down and say, well, hang on a second, what are these self-identified issues? Let's try and address those. Thinking about what has already happened, so SaaS, software as a service. Many organisations have already run through into SaaS. The other thing that some organisations are finding is that they've got shadow SaaS. So there's SaaS that they don't know about. one of the investment banks did an assessment and found that they had 50% more software as a service than what they had on their register. So what that means is you've got managing directors and directors who are using their credit card to buy magic. The magic is fantastic. What they don't realise is that this magic is actually software as a service, and it's becoming shadow software as a service, which means it's not being governed and managed and controlled in the same way as the rest of the software as a service, because people didn't know that it was there. So I think that's an interesting point. There's another investment bank who's very hesitant to move to cloud native. And the reason he's hesitant to do that is because he doesn't understand how he can possibly move to cloud native and not share their data and algorithms. And if you're an investment bank, you don't necessarily want to share your data and algorithms with the cloud service provider. So and he's trying to grapple with that question, which is a good question. There's another investment bank that's decided they're not moving to public cloud. Well, there's no strategy to move to public cloud, but what they are doing is they are moving there by exception. So when somebody comes to them and says, can you please move this application to the public cloud, they'll say, okay, by exception, I'll move you across. But there is no strategy to move to public cloud, which I think is really interesting. And I think that's, I think that's it. So the other last point on the cloud would be what's going on with respect to the business case. So back in 2019, the business case was easy. We're moving from CapEx to OpEx, and that made a lot of sense. But now it's looking like the cost play doesn't work quite so well. So we're moving to flexibility, innovation, and scalability, which are now bigger emphases. I can see I'm fast running out of time, so I'll just quickly touch on AI/ML, but just to say, McKinsey called it out as the next big thing in 2018. I don't think we're there yet. And I think that the reason we're not there yet is because there's a significant amount of legacy tech and data that everyone has to deal with, certainly the incumbent banks. There's a skill gap, because it takes a lot of skill to be able to do AI and ML models at the moment. There's also, the regulator is asking lots of questions. You've got shadow AI and ML going on as well, because it's hidden deep within software that you're using that you just didn't know was there. And I think the other thing that's happening is the technology is becoming easier to access with low code and no code. And I think that is exciting because, if it gets to a point where my mother might be able to deploy an AI and ML algorithm, then perhaps we've made it there. So that's it. So just to summarise, I've talked about IoT, I've talked about over-reliance of technology, which I don't think there is, although it is a risk. I've talked about past mistakes within the smart tech, centralising fraud and risk operations, and then finally I've just touched on just generally cloud and AI/ML, because you can't talk about financial services and tech without mentioning those two. Thank you.
And thank you very much indeed. Really, really interesting stuff. Do we have questions on Slido? Let's see if we've got those coming up. We've got a couple. Okay, let me take those in turn if you wouldn't mind. So do financial services companies really need to be at the bleeding edge of technology? I think you used the word over-reliance as a test to this.
I love this. I love this because if you go to, just as an example, if you go to Boeing, or go to an airline company, for example, they titanium plate everything. Everything's got a contingency factor of like 10 because they're trying to keep the planes in the air, stop them from crashing, and keep it all alive. Which means, but then they carry it across into their tech, and they have a contingency factor of 10 in their tech, and they're like, well, this general ledger can never go down. Well, that's not quite right. And I think this is a great question with respect to banking, because I think we don't need to be at the bleeding edge of technology. I think what banks particularly and financial services companies are all about is trust. And I think that needs to be the utmost important thing that gets protected. And if that means that you're not going into the bleeding edge tech because you're protecting the trust that the customers have in you and your bank and protecting you from outage, cyber breach, reg breach, and achieving strategic objectives, then no, I don't think banks need to be at the bleeding edge of technology.
Which, and that word trust maybe leads us nicely into the second question. Will being well-regulated and secure become a competitive advantage against more fast-moving but perhaps more risky competitors?
So this is tough too, because the incumbent banks are regulated more harshly than the neobanks. So we're talking about different goalposts. The neobanks, to be well-regulated and secure, have a lower bar than the incumbent banks. So, I mean, you have to be well-regulated because otherwise the regulator will take your license from you. And you have to be secure because if you get a breach, the customer will lose faith in you and trust. So I think it does need to be well regulated. Everyone does need to be meeting their regulation, and everyone does need to be secure. But it's not an even playing field across financial services.
Note a sense of frustration in your voice.
It is what it is. I mean, I quite like the challenges of a big bank, but yeah, it is not an even playing field.
Just a final question from me. Cloud-enabled business transformation, that's the unit. You talked about some other examples, and you talked about the sort of by exception approach to this. I assume by exception is not the approach you take. Can you just give us a sense of the approach that you do take?
So I can't talk too specifically, but much like most of the banks, much like us, you know, we have a strategy of this is what's going to go to public cloud, and this is what's not going to go to public cloud, and it's potentially going to stay, you know, on-prem or in private cloud. That particular investment bank that I mentioned has no strategy to move to public cloud at all. So they haven't earmarked a whole section of their estate to move to public cloud. It's all just staying on-prem or in private cloud. I think that the plan for them is at some point the private cloud will just be switched onto public. So they've done the hard work to get it onto private cloud so they can switch over later. I think that's a sensible strategy, but that's not the norm. Most folks are moving a whole bunch of their estate to public cloud, and a whole bunch of their estates either staying put on-prem or in the private cloud.
Very good. And as we've been speaking, another question. So let's take this. Is insourcing and outsourcing a cycle, and how will regulation impact where we go next on this? Thoughts?
Yes, I used to work at IBM, so I was very pro outsourcing. But yeah, I mean, I think this is what we're dealing with now. So if you think about 10 years ago when you outsourced your tech to Hewlett-Packard or IBM or whoever it was, your entire tech function get outsourced. Now what we're talking about is essentially outsourcing a whole heap of our function to the cloud service providers. So I really do think about the wave of cloud movement that's going on at the moment as the next type of outsourcing. I think it does, I guess, kind of go in waves, but I think a lot of organisations need to consider, are they a bank, and they're predominantly a bank, and you know they're happy for their technology to be non-competitive, or are they, a lot of, like JP Morgan and Santander, for example, calling themselves technology companies that have a banking licence? And I think depending upon where you sit on that decision will decide how much of your estate you wanted to outsource to whoever it is, whether it's a big IBM, for example, or whether it's a cloud service provider.
And I can't let you go without just returning, I love this phrase that you use, using credit cards to buy magic, this idea of SaaS purchases, sort of slightly off the books. I mean, is that something that will just continue forever, or are we getting on top of that?
Well, I think it's an education piece. I think that folks see the magic and they just want it, and they don't quite realise that it, you know, not only could it be software as a service, but could also be artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms within whatever it is that they've bought. So I think it's an education piece, and I think shadow tech, if you think about it, has been an issue for technology, for CIOs for decades. So I think this is just the next thing that's the issue, you know, hidden AI/ML, hidden SaaS, and it's double, you need to approach it dually, one with educating the folks who've got the credit cards and spinning up these SaaS solutions, but then also the CIO needs to be educating and also scanning to try and find these as well.
Very good. And thank you very much indeed.
Perfect, thank you.
Excellent stuff. One more presentation before we break for coffee. We're going to be in the company of Ruben Braham, who is Vice President of Cyberint, and we are going to talk, I think, threat intelligence. Absolutely. Thanks very much.
I hope you can hear me online too. Morning, everybody. My presentation is going to be around threat intelligence. I think Adam set the stage, spoke about the dark web quite a bit. So I think what I'm going to do is try to make it a bit more pragmatic here and show you all in a couple of steps how you can try to be a step ahead of those threat actors that are surfing the dark web or many other forums. So, just to start off, a few statistics. This is what we see, like a snapshot of what's happening in the last 60 days, 90 days. Phishing attacks on the rise. The holiday seasons are coming. And even more, you will see these dwelling up and kind of increasing. info stealers. We have collected more than 1 million computers infected with malware. That means they are sitting ducks, sitting targets, and covering many places, including the UK. I think for the UK, it's like about 50,000 plus credentials that are out there, and waiting for people to come in and put some ransomware, find a way in, and find an attack. Credit cards were spoken about. We have an incredible amount of database of stolen credit cards, CVV and everything included, and you can see the numbers. We have a database of more than a few millions in the last few months. And basically, there are dark webs that we monitor, and also many other forums, upcoming forums like Telegram, Discord, etc. So it's not one place. These guys, the bad guys, are spreading their network. They are in many, many more places now than we know. They use social media quite a bit. They're using forums on Telegram and kind of expanding their business, and it makes it even more challenging and enticing to get into the network, to be a part of that forum, and to engage with them, and to get things out of the bad guy to help our customers. Starting off with the threat intelligence program is really where you try to see what's happening outside your network. This is a typical organization with multiple digital assets that are around the network. You have web services, you have multiple assets that are there, and then you have this nice place where you have all these threat actors that are always trying to be creative. For one thing, they want to penetrate the organization, the enterprise that they are trying to attack. So it's one point of entry that they need, and they are looking for that point of entry. So that economy is kind of working day and night. They may be bad guys, they may be super bad guys, but there is help, and we have a platform that allows us to kind of collect all those threat intelligence pieces and bring it to our customers in a very, very targeted manner. So the first step is actually looking beyond your perimeter and trying to protect and trying to monitor everything, including your attack surface. So that's where we play, and that's about us. Why is this important to you, when you look at digital risk protection and threat intelligence as part of your strategy? Basically, one, you can illustrate the risks very well internally. Being in financial services, very critical. You have governance needs, you have many other needs, and you need to be a step ahead. You can use it to bring reference threats to when you're building your security strategy. So you can have analysis, you have historical evidence, and you can kind of use that and on a strategic level. Then you have many operational things that you can do. So basically, you can identify the risks and attack surface on an ongoing basis. You detect breaches, and you try to prevent them. And that's kind of pretty much important when you start to build your digital risk protection and threat intelligence strategy. That should be the first step. Then going on that first step is getting pinpointed intelligence. You have millions of data points. If you're a big bank, if you're insurance services, or any fintech company, I'm sure you have multiple things. And now, how do you kind of bring the very targeted thing to get focused attention and remediation? So that's very important, to get targeted intelligence. And first thing is you get that targeted intelligence, and then expand your intelligence to look at what's happening in the industry. Who are those bad actors that are threat actors that are kind of going to disrupt yourself, your business, and understand if they are very active in your industry and can help you, be the next breach point. So for us, it's important that when you build your strategy, you take into account that you get very targeted and extensive industry intelligence research that is brought to you, that you can determine if it's a Revil or whatever that is trying to disrupt your business, and you have a lot of information. So part of this threat intelligence strategy is to have a proactive threat intelligence gathering service, and then reactive to look at this and do like a post-mortem. So you have forensic tool to analyze the TTPs and the IOCs and understand where those points of breach are coming from. There's a tool that we have, it's called Forensic Canvas. It allows you to really go deep and understand and analyze those points of breaches. So sometimes you learn also from things that happen retroactively as a post-mortem. The next step is actually to think like a threat actor. Try to identify and monitor very well your attack surface, your external attack surface. Map your assets. We heard about shadow IT, so web services, different things that are around. Sometimes we lose control. So start to map and discover your digital assets in a structured manner, and then you can identify your issues and vulnerabilities around that. Basically, it will give you the first step to have a proactive protection from outside the perimeter, looking from outside inside, and looking at the attack surface and monitoring that. Your benefits would be basically it will minimize a lot more your digital risks and be less succumb to breaches if you really map all the vulnerabilities around your digital assets. Then the next step, and I think we heard a lot about the dark web, but that's only one component that we see today. We see that there are hundreds and thousands of sources. So you need a team that will supply you enough and cover those sources. It's if it's Telegram I mentioned, if it's other sources, could be also code pieces on GitHub that are leaked out. So you really need to spread your net and understand that you are covering all those sources. Today the guys are becoming clever. They want to keep more engaged, keep more interactive, build more forums, and that's why you really need to monitor multiple sources. And we have an excellent team of really industry-based analysis that cover thousands of sources on an ongoing basis, including new sources that are being developed. So keeping one step ahead and helping you provide you with those sources of intelligence. The next step is actually then looking at the multiple business risks that you face and how you can protect yourself. So you have a large amount of business risks that when you look from the outside, you can get protection and you can be less succumb to those business risks. So your digital footprint, your attack surface being mapped, data leakage, compromised credentials, protecting your brand, and basically phishing attacks, even having proactive components on your domain, like a phishing beacon that we have is basically going to monitor the web and allow you to see if there is any phishing attacks proactively. So that phishing beacon will basically allow you to be highlighted or alerted. You get a targeted alert saying somebody is trying to phishing attack, phishing attempt, and fraud after that. So there are multiple pieces of fraud that can happen. If it's a credit card, if it's money laundering, all that can be monitored with really targeted intelligence that is brought towards your organization. And attackware, we spoke about malwares, etc. Again, the more you understand the vulnerabilities, the better you can be protected from attacks beyond the perimeter. The last step, but not the least, is actually remediation and reporting. So you have the information. Now you need to mitigate. You have a phishing attack. You need a takedown. You need an immediate process that will take down that phishing attack. You have leaked credentials in your organization, and I'm sure that if you all want to check with us, we'll find leaked credentials on any or every financial institution that's on this face of this earth. I can probably very much guarantee that, and give you targeted information about that. So once you have that, now you want to remediate it. So you issue a password reset. You do some other process. Basically, if you get that information and you have the whole process integrated with your SOC, your SIEM, etc., the seamlessness works faster and gives you a better holistic protection. So, saying that, I think I have a few more minutes, and I'll try to, before I take questions, cover a few examples. Looking at 5 of those steps, basically, that I mentioned are the real baseline. Now, it's also important that you understand that these things can help you really highlight real-time issues. So I brought a few examples of real-time, and there are many examples. You know, I have thousands and thousands and thousands of examples, but I wanted to give you all a taste of a few examples. Website impersonation detected and alerted, and the takedown was issued in order to help the company, without taking names, obfuscated the names, basically allowing them to mitigate a possible risk in a brand abuse. Phishing attacks, it's happening a lot, everywhere, all the time. Look at the US Postal, right? This is UK Postal. It's happened not long ago, right? So this is something that was a fake. A lot of people succumbed, put their details and credentials, and basically giving information to those stealers and those and bad guys or nice guys in there for this thing, and they will then use your information. And by the time you realize you lost a few $1,000, the financial institution suffers that. Although you, as a financial institution, will return this to the. Oh, Siri wants something. You see it. Technology, Garmin, etc. No, Siri, I don't want anything from you. I'm talking about phishing. Maybe you want to enlighten the people about phishing. Now, I want to talk about something. This was targeted against a bank in a financial institution. And our analysts found multiple attempts almost at a similar time period, showing us that there was evidence that it's not one attack, but it's an attack that was coordinated by a phishing kit. So those threat actors, some of them have been very clever. They build a kit and they sell it in the ecosystem. And 50 people, 100 people buy those kits for $200, for $300, whatever the going price is. And basically they build their phishing site that will replicate what's happening in the bank. Now, once we understood that, and this is an example of a kit, you don't really need to be a very techie person. You can be even a script kiddie that can easily understand and kind of build this, taking this kit and building that phishing site. So once we understood that the problem was not one phishing site, but a kit, now we wanted to go to the source of that information, understand who the threat actor was, look at that threat actor and understand what he was doing. And we understood that this threat actor or hacker was building what we call the true login phishing kit. Now, this true login phishing kit is a bit sophisticated. It's different than an ordinary phishing kit where basically you will be redirected to a look and feel that is exactly like your bank account, and then the traffic is redirected after that. So I enter my banking system, and I think that it's exactly my banking system. I put in my credentials, and voila, I've given it to somebody to use it for his purposes. So basically, it's very difficult to understand and to detect this. But once you have the intelligence, you can take down. In this case, also, a threat actor we engaged with the threat actor and brought to his arrest. Okay, so some of these good guys end up in a not so good place for themselves. Shadow IT, I think it was mentioned here. So you map out in the swift age of moving to the cloud, digitalization, you have to really monitor very well all your digital assets, the known and the unknown. Credit card was mentioned, so you can use your credit card. Today I can, as a marketing person, I kind of subscribe to many marketing tools, basically even before my IT person is aware of it. And sometimes he's stuck with the integration, but that's the fact of life. And if you're a bigger organization, you have multiple departments doing this, HR, etc. So mapping those, having those web services monitored on an ongoing basis against vulnerabilities is pretty much important, and that basically stops the way in. It's like you can, once you have a vulnerability, you have the way. It can be a subdomain hijacking, could be an open cloud bucket, so many issues that you need to detect, need to be highlighted, and you need to have it on an ongoing basis. So 24/7, continuous, ongoing, 365, all the time, and allowing you to so this kind of shows the buckets that were there. Leaked credentials, very important in the financial services. We found 25 or 30 leaked credentials, including passwords that were active. So the hacker was selling this information for a good piece of money. And, you could understand that this is legit, this is giving you access in, and you could purchase it. Basically, when we identified that it's ongoing identification, we highlighted it to this financial institution and had this remediated. VIP protection is kind of an added service that you should have. Basically, today in the world of social media, the CEO, the key executives are always trying to be defaced or attacked. And in this case, basically, our threat intelligence team found out the source of a threat actor that was threatening the CEO of an enterprise and helped mitigate and get his arrest. From the geolocation, you can see it was not in China and not in Russia, but this time in the US. So we had a swift mitigation of this also. But it means you need to go undercover, you need to engage, you need to have those virtual avatars. Fraud, we saved our clients multiple times on business logics. So it's a real-time example where the business logic bypass allowed them to lose a lot of money. The moment we identified it, they blocked it, and kind of that was the immediate impact of saving it from a business logic, which probably wouldn't go discovered if not alerted by the right intelligence. Credit cards online for sale. As I said, we have a database now of many millions, and those are real credit cards, can be used for any malicious purpose, buying anything, and available. So if we have them, many people don't have all the credit cards, but have a few of them that they are buying and they're using. So we alert our customers and we help our customers kind of, mitigate those and actually you have a very good dashboard that can show you by country, by bank, by whatever, by financial institution. So that really, I didn't want to go into demos here, but basically there are nice tools available and dashboards that can bring information at your fingertips. A few words on Cyberint, being one of the leaders in digital risk protection and threat intelligence. Basically, we play in the market where we cover both digital proactively securing your assets, the domain that Gartner and Forrester call as digital risk protection, bring you threat intelligence from the dark web, but also multiple sources, and then allows you to map your assets, your external assets. So we uniquely play a bit in all the domains, trying to cover and bring a more holistic solution to our customers that are trying to build their threat intelligence program. Some of the accolades, so I won't pat my back for now, but let's going on just to show that it's an ongoing process of discovery of your data and your assets, and ongoing monitoring and remediation by taking down and connecting to systems to really allow mitigation. So this kind of shows you in one slide. We have a platform that's technology-based with a lot of modules that will allow you to get intelligence, to do the dark web and other sources monitoring your attack surface, forensic canvas, phishing and brand protection. We have expert services, so a team of highly skilled analysts that have done this in many places and in their past from the military. We are from Israel mainly, so our analysts are highly skilled from the army. They are trained in the National Army, and basically when they exit from there, they come with a lot of resourcefulness, so they go beyond anything. So basically we get that information. The team is highly skilled, and you can use their resources to do deep investigations, if it's engaging and trying to understand what's happening in the threat actor against your organization. So multiple things can be done with those. Again, it's a service helping you protect you holistically from multiple business risks and bringing remediation to your organization. So in summary, 5 things. The first one would be have your strategy set out, that you need threat intelligence, you want to engage. And I'm sure that in some way you are covering some of it, but you need a more holistic look for it. Look at getting very targeted intelligence. We know that customers receive hundreds and thousands of data points every time. Now, how do you take the ones that are really, really high risk and important? That's key for us. Partner with a vendor that can help you and make life easier for you. So it's us or anybody of our competitors, but be sure that you have a service that you can use and get those information at your fingertips. And then you can augment that, use your analysts, use additional services of analysts externally, and bring that together to really take those risks and mitigate them, safeguarding your brand with intelligence and protection beyond the perimeter. Okay, so if you want to talk to us, you can come.
Thank you very much, Ruben. Should we take one of those questions? We were just talking. There's a couple of questions. I know we are rushing towards the break, but let's just quickly take one of those 2 questions. At random, I'm going to take the top one. The trouble with threat intelligence is that you are always one step behind the bad actor. Thoughts, please. Briefly, if you wouldn't mind.
I'll try to keep it very brief. So, yes, you are one step behind, but if you are quick and you identify it super fast, you can be one step ahead, because the moment you engage and you understand that information is relevant to your organization, you can stop him before he spreads a disease or whatever. So my key thought is be fast, be super swift. We'll never beat the threat actor or the hacker. He will always try to find a new way in, but you need to be prepared.
Very good. More questions for Ruben over coffee. Ruben, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, as I said, time for a coffee break. The other side of the break, we're going to talk supply chain, we're going to talk ransomware, we're going to talk digital identity, and we have a final panel where we'll return to where we started this morning with John, building a resilient culture. We're back at 11:20. Thank you all very much.